Hey guys, tonight we will drift upriver before dawn toward a quiet city of earth and sky where the plaza breathes like a sleeping animal and the mounds keep the night's last secrets. Water hushes under paddles, pearl-colored mist curls over reeds, and somewhere ahead, cedar smoke writes a thin line into the pale. Corn dancers wait on a slope, their steps soft as turning pages, and they'll wave you higher, one breath at a time. It's gentle, unhurried, and cheeky warning, you probably won't survive this wakefulness. Sleep will ambush you with a blanket and a lullaby. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I love seeing the little constellation of cities and midnights in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Mist slips along the river like silk from a basket as you ride toward a landing of woven reeds. The shore is toasted cornmeal. Behind river cane, cedar smoke threads the pale. A boy cups a clay bowl of coals and coaxes them awake with a pierced gourd. You step onto packed earth and the city opens, a broad plaza, green-shouldered mounds, tall posts in a ring like quiet elders, houses braided from saplings and dressed in light clay. A woman laughs like water over pebbles. Two girls carry baskets of hominy, steam rising like halos. On the nearest slope, figures in cornleaf skirts lift their hands and beckon. You came at the good hour, one tells you when you draw close, voice steady as soil. She folds a tassel into your palm, silky, cool, a green bookmark from memory. The dancers smell of charred husk and sweetgrass and river breath. Their ankles carry strings of tiny shells that hush when they turn, a sound like distant rain teasing dry leaves. You climb with them along a path in the mound's flank, steps modest and forgiving. The clay keeps traces of many mornings, heel moons and toe commas, a palm of feet. Your breath matches the city's tempo. The breeze decides to help. Your shoulders loosen. The dancer beside you points to the ring of posts below. When the sun finds its place, she says, our shadows tell us the feast. You pocket that line like a smooth stone. At a landing, the world stretches. The plaza is a blank page. A potter sets out bowls the color of riverbed. A trader unknots copper bells that remember yesterday's sun. What you thought were birds are gourd rattles tapping against hips. You smile and keep moving. Your guides pause where the slope tastes of dew. One kneels, ear to ground, listening for the drum to be carried up, as if the earth keeps careful time. We greet the day with soft feet. We ask the mounds to wake first. You try their stance, knees loose, sternum unlatched, and it feels like agreeing with morning. At the top, wind glosses the grass into a quiet lake. The city hushes below, roof lines like sleeping turtles, the river a silver thread stitched through green, and beyond, generous prairie. Someone presses a warm steep of roasted kernels and mint into your hands. The cup is heavy with thumbprints. Your chest answers with a lazy yes. The dancers speak the way kin do when everyone knows the task and no one minds the slowness. They show you rattles, seeds inside like a light rain, and teach your wrist a small figure eight that calls dawn without startling it. Not loud. The day is shy when new. You try it twice. The motion softens into you. A runner arrives with news that is not urgent. A heron in the shallows, a sign for patience in good crossings. Smiles pass around as if the heron were a cousin who refuses to hurry. Cedar thickens, then thins like a lifted curtain. A hawk scribbles itself across pale sky and slips behind the far mound. Come, your first guide says, shell anklets raining the tiniest whisper. We will show you how the plaza breathes. You follow, stepping into a story told every day, a gentle loop with room for new footprints. The mound hums in your souls as if it remembers everyone who climbed with a drum, a basket, or a question, and you let the city's quiet metronome keep you for a while.
You follow the dancers down a gentled slope where cedar smoke loosens itself into ribbons, and the morning smells like patient kitchens. A clay pot the size of a cradle sits in a nest of stones. Steam lifts in pale layers, a quiet flag that says breakfast. Someone has written a circle of footprints around it, soft evidence of people hovering and stirring and telling the same small jokes they tell every dawn. Your guide, the one who tucked the tassel in your palm, touches your elbow with a cornleaf nod. Eat first, she says. Then sing low so the sun doesn't blush. A woman with wrists strong as mud walls turns a paddle through hominy that winks like white pebbles in a creek. She tips the spoon, lets one glossy kernel fall to the hearth, a perfumed offering that snaps and sighs. For the ones who came before and taught water to sweeten corn, your guide murmurs. You can taste the ash and the river and the patience in that single command. A boy fans the coals with a woven mat, careful as if coaxing a sleepy animal. The fire answers with a cat's yawn. They give you a small bowl whose heft anchors your hands. It is warm, almost a polite warning. You almost do the inevitable, an Olympic fumble, but a laughing auntie slides a ring of braided husk under the bowl, a tiny throne that saves your fingertips from making dramatic speeches. You learn fast, she teases, which is generous because all you've learned so far is where not to hold it. The hominy tastes like rain remembered by stone. A thread of deer fat, glossy as dawn, streaks the top. Someone pinches in crushed sumac. Someone else drops a pinch of salt from a gourd, as if seasoning were a blessing you have to sneak past the day. You find yourself chewing in the rhythm you learned on the mound. Slow in, slower out. The city's breath borrowing yours. Cedar drifts through your hair and refuses to leave, which is fine. You weren't planning to smell like anything else today. Around you, low humming gathers, a sound that begins in chests and finds the pot's rim, the gourds, the air. The melody is a circle with no hurry to close. You echo it, uncertain at first, humming like someone learning to walk on a swaying dock. The dancers approve with their eyes. Corn songs like it when you sing as if you're busy with something else, a girl explains, absolutely sincere. You try that, stirring your bowl, pretending total indifference, and suddenly the tune settles into your throat like a tame bird that chose you. A thin mist still keeps the plaza soft, as if the city asked for 5 more minutes. The ring of posts waits off to the side like a calendar that doesn't need pages. From somewhere beyond, the runner's heron lifts and glides downriver, the beak a drawn line of quiet intention. The sight makes everyone smile the kind of smile that says, yes, the crossings will be kind today. You didn't know you were worried about crossings, but relief moves anyway through your shoulders. Your guide shows you the way they greet daylight without spilling it. She dips her fingers into a shallow bowl of dew gathered from leaf edges, touches her temples, throat, and the center of her chest. So we remember to see, to speak softly, to carry a steady heart. You mirror her, pressing coolness into warm skin. The dew smells faintly of sweetgrass and ridge-lined wind. For a second, you're convinced you can hear your own pulse sinking to a drum that hasn't started. The drummer arrives with a round frame wrapped in skin, cradled like a sleepy child. He sits, listens to the pot hiss, listens to the cedar, listens to the birds, not yet convinced, and then taps once, just once, like a pebble dropped into a lake. Ripples happen in shoulders, in ankles, in the invisible net of everyone's attention. He nods as if the day answered in the space after that single sound. Over your shoulder, a gourd rattle whispers, seeds ticking like rain on a roof. For a moment you think of the figure eight the dancers taught you, and your wrist remembers it without asking permission. Breakfast company takes turns telling the small news no one needs, but everyone keeps. A basket lost a stitch, and then found it. The river gave back a snapped paddle as if to apologize. Someone's roof glowed like a turtle's back after last night's drizzle. The mounds keep dreams for us and return them as ideas, an elder says. And he says it like he's describing a neighbor's reliable habit, not a miracle. Someone refills your bowl, which is kindness and gentle conspiracy. The second bowl is the one that decides whether you'll be an efficient adult today or a satisfied creature of routine and rivers. You accept it, obviously, because corn doesn't like to dine alone. A drizzle of honey is offered, then teased away with a grin. Later, when the dance has room for sweetness, you pretend to be offended. Your guide pretends to believe you, and everything is perfectly calm. When the pot sighs lower and the cedar thins, the humming turns to words shaped like water bending around stones. You catch fragments, the word for first steam, the word for the shy light just before a bird commits to flight, the word for the quiet between 2 drips from a roof. You try one, then another. Your mouth rearranges itself to fit, and the aunties approve with the kind of nod that makes your spine stand collar without effort. A child brings a shallow tray of roasted kernels, amber, crackling, intensely themselves, and offers you a pinch to tuck into your pouch. For later, when your feet ask for a story, she says, solemn, as if feet are notorious for dramatic requests. You tuck the kernels beside your tassel bookmark. The pouch rides your hip like a small, agreeable secret. By the time bowls stack, the sun is a pale coin pressed to the sky's palm. The drummer taps twice. The ring of posts catches a light that suggests directions rather than orders. The corn dancers loop husks around their wrists. Shells breathe at their ankles. Now, your guide says, we teach the city to wake up with soft feet. You stand, the hominy settling into warmth inside you, and realize the morning has already rehearsed you, breath, wrist, heart. So the next steps feel less like learning and more like remembering a polite old choreography. The heron, as is satisfied with the pace of this day, coasts toward a sandbar and folds itself into the shape of patience. You follow your friends toward the plaza's quiet center, humming the work song that pretends to not care. And the mounds listen with their green shoulders, ready to lift you up when it's time. They guide you along a path stitched with reed mats, where the day opens into a market that has perfected the art of doing everything slowly on purpose. Stalls are really circles of friends who brought their skills with them. A hinge of shade made from woven cane, a blanket of river grass, a low plank smoothed by many elbows. The plaza breathes, and the market breathes with it. Exhale, baskets. Inhale, copper bells. Exhale again, strings of pale shell that catch light like water. Your guide taps her anklet, and the shells answer with a whisper, the same shy yes you heard on the slope. A basket maker sits cross-legged, hands moving as if remembering a song that requires no voice. River cane splits to neat ribbons, then coils into bowls whose shadows look like quiet whirlpools. He shows you the trick. Thumb a little firmer here, ease there, and your first loop tries to behave, but wobbles like a newborn fawn. He laughs the kind of laugh that adds another rib to your day. Let the cane tell you how round it wants to be, he says, and suddenly your wobble becomes a polite ellipse that passes for respectable in good company. Beside him, a coppersmith holds up a bell no bigger than a walnut, hammered thin until the morning can see its own reflection. He shakes it once. The note is a droplet striking a still pool. River metal, mountain metal, traded along old roads, he says, tapping the rim with a twig. You imagine that road, canoes stitched together by stories, shoulders remembering how far to carry, promises packed in bark-wrapped bundles. The bell sings again, and a toddler tries to grab the sound out of the air, both hands determined. When it falls through her fingers, she claps anyway, convinced she caught the important part. At a low cloth sprinkled with tiny stars, a woman strings shell beads in spirals that echo the inside of a conch. She lifts one finished gorget, white as hush, and says, "For wrists that remember waves." She teaches you to twist cordage from milkweed fiber, palm to thigh, until the strand holds like a sentence that finally knows its own ending. Your thread is uneven. She kisses her teeth in approval. "Good," she says. "It will tell on you if you pull too hard." You tuck the cord with your tassel and roasted kernels, a growing pocket meadow of small reliables. You pause at a cloth where slate knives and shirt flakes lie like quiet lightning. The toolmaker's hands are nicked in a way that says practice, not accident. He shows you a blade that can split a reed without bruising it, and another that shaves a curl of cedar so thin it becomes a breath. For spoons, for paddles, for the line of a drum hoop, he explains, laying each purpose down with care, as if introducing old friends who will certainly get along. He presses a dull scraper into your palm for laziness emergencies. You both grin, and returns to trimming a handle with a patience that could instruct snow on how to fall. Somewhere, someone is roasting squash seeds with salt and humor. The air tastes slightly toasted. A potter smooths the seam of a coil-built jar. Shell-tempered clay catches sunlight in freckled glints. She wets her fingers in a bowl, turns the pot on her lap, and the wall thins to the transparency of a held breath. "For carrying stews that remember where the corn grew," she says, "and you believe a pot can do that." She stamps the shoulder with a little cane pattern that looks like pressed rain. You pass a loom of river cane where mats are born in long, thoughtful afternoons. The weaver slides weft through warp with a bone shuttle, creating a geometry you could nap on. She pats a finished square, lays it over your arm, and the weight is both nothing and perfectly present, like a warm cat agreeing with you about everything. For floors, for boats, for the moment when you want to sit and decide not to, she says, eyes smiling because she knows that moment. The corn dancers are never far. You keep noticing them at the edges of your attention, tying husks into ribbons, adjusting shell strings, making small repairs you would have sworn were unnecessary until they weren't. One of them shows you a gourd rattle not yet filled, its belly hollow like a waiting room. She tips a pouch of seeds, and they rush in with a sound like soft rain inventing itself. "Listen," she whispers, shakes it once, and the plaza tilts toward the note, as if sunlight just learned a new way to land. You feel the figure 8 return to your wrist, an echo of the morning lesson, and the gourd answers with easy contentment. A salt trader opens a little basket lined with bark. Inside, white crystals nestle like tiny moon shards. He pinches a few into your palm. "To remember thirst before it speaks too loudly," he says, then trades a fistful to the coppersmith for a bell whose voice he already trusts. Nearby, a woman in a dress the color of corn silk lays out dried berries that look like garnets and taste like sunset trying to be polite. You buy none of it and somehow receive everything, because this is the kind of market where hands move more than goods, where the real tender is the rumor that you'll stay for the dance. You almost knock a stack of reed trays into a dramatic career change, but the auntie from breakfast materializes with the speed of a midsummer tongue click, steadies the stack, and places the top tray in your hands as if to say, "Here, carry the evidence that you are supervised." You parade it 6 careful steps to a mat and bow like a novice whose diploma is made of not breaking things. The auntie's grin is a lantern under a shawl. A boy rolls a stone disc across a smooth lane, and a girl paces beside it, measuring glide with bare feet. The disc hums along, a little planet obeying someone's patient gravity before kissing a stick and coming to decorous rest. They cheer without shouting, a market rule observed in the name of the day's-long nap later. Your guide nudges you. "We practice aim when the morning is gentle. It teaches us how to place our hopes where we can reach them by noon." Over everything, the wood henge posts stand quiet, the calendar pretending not to eavesdrop. Copper notes, reed rustles, the hush of shell, the whisper of cord, all of it drifts toward those timbers as if offering tiny proofs that the hour is unfolding correctly. Somewhere upriver, the heron decides the sandbar is acceptable, folds itself into acceptance, and the boatmen at the edge of the market nod. Safe crossings continue. When you loop back towards the plaza's center, arms full of nothing but borrowed calm, the dancers beckon you with their anklets, shells whispering a promise you now recognize. After tools and trades, there will be the soft mathematics of light, and then the climb. The market watches you go the way a contented hearth watches a pot. Not possessive, just sure you'll be back when warmth is required again. Your guides turn you toward the ring of timbers that has been waiting at the edge of everything, pretending not to know it is important. The posts stand in measured patience, each one with a shaved face that watches sunrise like an elder who remembers everyone's birthday by the taste of air. A pair of keepers waits there, palms marked with charcoal and ochre, hair smelling of cedar and early dew. They greet you as if you've arrived right on the quietest minute, which of course you have, because the market and the mounds and even that dignified heron have been adjusting their breath to escort you here. Stand where the foot remembers, one keeper says, tapping a packed earth mark the size of a turtle's back. You step onto it, and your heels find hollows worn by other heels. The second keeper hands you a thin reed cord with tiny knots tied along its length. Knots for days, spaces for weather, he says. You hold the cord stretched between your thumbs, a small bridge where shadow will land. Your job is to stand still, easily your best skill when a nap is circling. He points to a particular post with a narrow slit cut near the top. When the sun touches the slit, he murmurs, this circle whispers yes. He says whisper as if it's a measured quantity, a unit of agreement, the way some people talk about handfuls or mouthfuls. The plaza's hum, never loud, pauses to listen. Even the copper bell notes drift thinner, as if removing their shoes. A shallow bowl of water sits on a low stand fashioned from lashed willow. The first keeper kneels and leans over it until the sky paints itself in the bowl. Clouds tell us what they will do by practicing in here, she jokes, then becomes ceremonious, smoothing the surface with one fingertip. She tips her chin toward you. Look, the sun rehearses. In the reflection, dawn is a pale coin experimenting with edges. You glance up, the real coin rises, and its light threads between two westernmost posts, not the slit yet, just a polite approach, a throat clearing. Children arrive the way small breezes do. One carries a stick with rill marks that count mornings. Another wears a string of seeds that she will slide along each time a shadow kisses her toes. They post themselves beside their favorite timbers as if they're waiting for cousins. We lose track on purpose so we can find it together, a boy confides, deadly solemn, then grins because the secret is not very secret. Your guide touches the reed cord in your hands, turning one knot to sit against your left thumb. Corn Festival comes when the sun moves from this knot to the next between these two keepers, she says, and the keepers nod, as if she recited a household proverb. Shadow's mouth will drink the line, the charcoal-palmed one adds, pointing to a thin scrape on the ground, a subtle groove aligned to the slit. We listen with our eyes. The first beam sharpens, threads the slit, slips along the ground like a quiet knife slicing softened honey. It finds the groove, and for a heartbeat, the shadow of the post and the line of earth agree so perfectly, you hear a collective inhale. Bells do not ring, gourds do not shake, the plaza stills without freezing. Then the keepers exhale together, the way people do when the stew tastes precisely like the memory it was aiming for. Good, the second says. The year is walking where it said it would. You feel the figure 8 you learned with the rattle return to your wrist, not to shake, but to measure. An unconscious calibration to the city's pulse. The keepers show you how they check the other posts, with nothing fancier than string lengths, shadows, a thumb's width, a shell's diameter, a remembered step. Quiet math, one says, and taps the cord. Not space, not space. We make room for the sky to be a little moody. Everyone chuckles because everyone has been moody around breakfast, even on good days with perfect harmony. A girl asks if you want to hold the sighting stick. You accept. It's just a straight branch with two small notches cut in a mother and child pair. She tells you to bring the notch to your brow, Close one eye and let the sun's rim sit gentle between those teeth. When it fits like this, we ready the dance for first sweetness, she whispers. You glance down at your pouch where roasted kernels wait, suddenly understanding why the honey was delayed. The day wants a small ceremony of alignment before it settles into sweetness. The keepers move around the circle, scraping a little damp clay into tiny mounds at the base of certain posts, noting with fingertip lines how today's beam touched. One marks the earth with a smear of ochre and hums a line that feels like a map. He tells you their calendar is made of return and surprise. Return when the sun revisits a post, surprise when cloud or haze adds softness to a hard edge. We planned for both. Feasts do not mind being announced by two whispers instead of one. You kneel by the water bowl and watch the sky right more clearly, ripples easing to a glass that carries the timbers like dark brushstrokes. You remember the dew ritual, temples, throat, heart, and dip two fingers, touching the same places with a cooler assurance. The keepers approve with an almost invisible nod, because nothing here is loud except cicadas in the right month. Someone brings a thin cake of charcoal and a curl of shell. The keepers trade them with a little ceremony. Charcoal for marking shadow, shell for smoothing the scrape. The exchange happens in the same key as breakfast jokes, which is to say, reverent, without making a big production of it. They draw a short line beside today's groove touch, then blow the dust away, the way the drummer earlier blew ash from the rim before tapping once. Callbacks keep the world braided. Dew to bowl, bowl to sky, sky to slit, slit to line, line to feet, feet to plaza. A thought moves through the circle like a comfortable animal. If the slit had missed, they would have called tomorrow a rehearsal day rather than a wrong day, and you realize how kind that feels. Mistakes translated into practice. You tuck that away with your tassel and your roasted kernels, a toolkit of leniences. When the sun climbs past the slits so that the shadow trudges elsewhere with other appointments, the keepers stretch their backs and clap their hands softly, as if dusting off invisibles. The mounds are ready for visitors, your guide says, reading the ring's composed face. Shells at her ankles answer with rain's quiet cousin. A breeze pulls cedar through your hair again, its favorite hobby. The plaza resumes the light business of being itself. Bells tinkle once, the market breathes in, and the heron, satisfied with the audit, shifts on its sandbar throne. You return the reed cord, now warm from your hands, and the keeper tucks it into a pouch the way someone saves a letter with a good sentence. Up we go, your guide murmurs, soft feet, steady heart. She points to the first stair carved into the mound's flank, where the city's slow mathematics becomes a climb. You remember the figure 8 of the rattle and the single pebble tap of the drum, and feel ready to add your small, respectful sum to the morning's number.
The first stair waits with that polite confidence only well-worn earth can manage. Your guide touches the carved tread with her toes, shells at her ankle whispering the day's password, and you mirror her, soft feet, steady heart, letting weight travel through you like a friendly rumor. The climb is not a contest. The mound has already won patience. Below, the plaza smooths itself, and the ring of timbers holds its breath like a choir listening for the cue. You place the tassel bookmark in your pouch so it won't flutter into narrative heroics.
Dew remembers your temples. The memory cools your skin when the sun checks on you between breaths. The figure 8 from the rattle lesson settles into your wrist again, a tiny metronome that keeps the climb from gathering drama. Your calves submit a politely formatted complaint. You file it under rehearsals we approve. At the first landing, wind combs the grass until it shines like quiet water. The city loosens into a fan. Petals of pathways, spokes of causeways, small squares of gardens stitched to houses with clay-bright seams. Smoke lifts in disciplined twists. Somewhere a pot knocks another pot the way neighbors do when both belong to the same shelf. You breathe in, and the hominy you loved earlier hums back, slow, agreeable, convincing your ribs to space themselves generously. Children pop out of side paths like warm buns from a basket. They carry nothing heavier than responsibility, a gourd cup of water, a message folded in a leaf, a tiny bell that must not ring until the right corner is turned. One solemn girl walks backward for 6 steps, supervising your feet. "These stairs like attention," she says, and floats away, satisfied that you now understand the social needs of architecture. Your guide points with her chin. To the northeast, low ponds wear the sky like borrowed jewelry. To the west, a band of prairie opens its ribs. To the far south, a bead-bright line of canoes thinks about errands. Gardens rest in tidy humps, corn and beans and squash discussing the weather privately at their roots. Chickweed elbows the path with the pushiness of beloved cousins. A dancer brushes it aside with a husk ribbon and teaches you the little step-over that keeps ankles friendly. You pass a granary on stilts, legs like cranes, walls latticed to let grain breathe. A boy in the doorway sweets with a reed brush that whispers, swoosh, swoosh, as if drafting a treaty between dust and sunlight. He salutes with his broom as you climb by, the way one traveler acknowledges another, not strangers, merely on differently sloped errands. Somewhere below, a copper bell tests its single drop of morning and decides not to make a habit of it. Another landing, wider, with a bench of woven cane that knows the shape of tired. Your guide invites you to sit not because you must, but because pausing is a craft they practice. She unknots a bundle, roasted kernels, a smear of berry, a pinch of salt from the trader's moon shards. "For steady heart," she says, and the salt disappears on your tongue like good advice you finally decided to follow. The breeze edits your hair. The mounds ahead pretend to be farther than they are, just for fun. From here, the plaza's geometry becomes more honest. You see how paths braid into meeting places where shadows are invited to linger. The ring of timbers makes a thin halo on the ground. You remember the slit catching sunlight, the groove sipping its narrow river of gold. You remember the keeper's quiet math, not, space, not. And it glows through the city's arrangements like a patient thesis the day keeps proving with kindly footnotes. A pair of dancers passes you going up, each balancing a basket on her head, each basket behaving like a well-raised citizen. One murmurs a joke about the drummer's habit of tapping once and then inventing a whole personality for that one tap. Today he says the pebble was ambitious, she grins. You promise to be appropriately impressed, and the baskets approve by not falling. The stair narrows for a stretch, turning your attention into a tool. Your hands find the little ridges cut to help fingers listen. The mound is steady under you, hundreds of mornings pressed into the slope, all of them leaving polite signatures. Between steps, you catch the smell of cedar again, the familiar cousin you keep meeting in new rooms. A hawk writes a single character in the pale above. The heron downriver makes the punctuation. On the next terrace, a low wall cradles a rectangle of swept earth where dancers rehearse foot shapes with the seriousness of bakers measuring sunrise. You are herded gently past, no stops here yet, only a promise thrown over shoulder, later when rhythm needs witnesses. A child hushes a rattle with 2 fingers, like calming a tiny creature that wants to comment. Your wrist can't help a quiet figure 8, and the child smiles, granting you beginner status with a solemnity that makes it feel like an honor. You resume the climb, noticing how breath turns into a friendly companion when you greet it instead of chasing it. Your guide matches you, stride for stride, shells at her ankle counting time in Rain's handwriting. Each stair is a page, she says. Don't skip ahead. The plot is mostly air, but it still knows its order. You grin because the book in your pouch is a corn tassel, and this chapter is written in dirt. Near the top, the wind decides to help in earnest, tucking a cool hand into the small of your back. Houses below become a quilt of promises. People become moving commas in sentences you can now read from above. The ring of timbers shrinks to punctuation marks that have already done their job. You think briefly about the honey promised after alignment, and the thought alone feels like a dessert spoon laid on the table. The last stair is cut a hair taller, as if the mound is teasing you. You step up anyway with the calm confidence of someone who has never once tripped in public. You absolutely have. The aunties absolutely remember. They are choosing mercy. Your guide laughs in the key of cedar smoke and pulls you the final half step with 2 fingers resting light on your sleeve. Top. The word is a soft drum you do not strike. Air runs cooler, wider. The city unrolls like a fan in practiced hands. The plaza, the markets, the ponds, the prairie, the river, each takes its place without arguing, which is the courtesy of landscapes that have nothing left to prove. Above this terrace, a courtyard waits, a drumhead sleeping under cloth, gourds dozing in a basket, a little repair kit tucked coyly aside, as if the next scene has already laid out its tools and is pretending not to. Your ribs widen of their own accord. Your hands remember dew and the little reed cord. The mound remembers every foot and decides you can join the ledger. Breathe, your guide says, though you are already doing nothing else. Below, copper and shell offer a hush of approval. Somewhere, perfectly on time, a single pebble of sound suggests a rehearsal might be ready to begin. The courtyard holds its breath in a square of swept earth, a hush laid out like a blanket. Someone lifts the cloth from the great frame drum, and the skin shows a fine map of faint lines, a memory of last nights and many mornings. The drummer, serious as a pot that never boils over, presses his thumb to the center and nods, then taps once with the soft end of his stick. The sound does not leap like a pebble into a lake. It lands with a pleasant thud, like a foot stepping into a shallow puddle and deciding, that's enough adventure for the day. Moist night air has kissed the drumhead too fondly. Your guide tilts her head. She slept well, she says, and the drummer grins. Too well. Gourd rattles wait in a basket, their necks tagged with small twists of husk, river seeds, bean seeds, squash seeds, a whole garden of voices. A dancer reaches for the one trimmed with a faded corn silk tassel, the cue keeper for the first figure of the corn dance, the one that asks feet to plant, then to breathe. Her hand closes on air. Brows rise. Another dancer lifts the basket and turns it, expecting a shy rattle to materialize out of manners. It does not. She wandered, someone decides, as if the rattle has legs. And, to be fair, it always has a habit of arriving at the next rehearsal with fresh opinions. No one panics. Corn has taught them longer rhythms than a missing instrument or a sleepy drum. Still, the rehearsal softens at the edges, like bread dough before it remembers its shape. The dancers begin without the drum. Ankles chiming rain, wrists writing that figure eight you've been practicing since the market. They step the opening pattern, press, lift, press. Breath braided with hum, and the plaza below seems to lean in. You fall into the line with 2 heartbeats of hesitation, then settle, because the earth under this courtyard knows how to keep you. The drummer kneels with his tool roll. A bone pick, a shell smoother, a little stone. He plucks at the rawhide lacing, testing where the net has loosened. Needs sun, needs ember, he murmurs, voice polite to the instrument that serves the entire city's sense of time. He positions the drum so that the slanting light warms one quadrant. He taps again. The sound lifts a finger higher off the ground, but it still prefers puddles to lakes. She will wake. She is already thinking about honesty. You help count the rattles that are present. River, bean, squash, gourd with gourd, beloved overachiever, and the little one with shell crumbs for sparkle. The corn tassel rattle, the one that calls the first bow in the circle, is absent. The auntie from breakfast appears as if conjured by mild inconvenience. She was by the granary ladder, or unless she was at the stew, or with the boy measuring the stone disc. The auntie certainty covers all locations, which is the kind of certainty you can trust. Your guide laughs. Then she is near, she says, because all those places are attached to today. Without the tassel rattle, starts blur. 2 feet lift when one should listen, and a turn blooms a breath early. The dancers don't scold themselves. They rename each wobble a rehearsal, exactly the courtesy the keepers showed the ring of posts. Practice day, a girl whispers, sliding 3 seeds along her necklace to mark the 3 small misalignments. She does it with ceremony, because counting is a kind of kindness too. They adjust. One dancer hums a stronger note on the offbeat. Another taps a reed tray with her knuckle, producing a sound like polite rain on a politely thatched roof. You try a soft clap against your own ribs and feel the beat purr back through bone. The choreography shrugs into this new arrangement, willing to be taught in a different grammar until the proper teacher returns. The drummer, still consulting the weather of his drum, points at the sky with his chin. If we borrow a spoon of ember and let her sip, she will speak in pebbles again. Your guide nods toward the path down. Granary, stew, stone disc. She counts, turning the missing rattle into an itinerary. The child who once supervised your feet on the stair volunteers as detective, already adopting the posture of a hunter who chases clues that prefer to be found slowly. Before you descend, the line runs the first figure one more time, to ask the courtyard for its opinion. Ankles answer, shells reading the air in fine script. Your wrist remembers its figure 8 and finds a small, dignified confidence. Without the tassel rattle, your god becomes its temporary ghost, raising her fingers at the exact moments the missing sound would have called. The step tightens. Breath aligns. The city seems to exhale approval in the sway of grass on every terrace. You drink a little water from a gourd cup. The taste of cedar returns like a recurring joke that never tries too hard. Someone presses a crumb of honey to your palm, just a suggestion for courage. You dot it to your tongue, remembering the keeper's rule about alignment before sweetness. The drummer taps once more. Closer now, the puddle thud tidying itself around the edges. He lays a palm on the skin. "She wants to be helpful," he reports. "A verdict good enough for any of us." Inventory becomes game. One dancer mimes the rattle's personality. Flirt, obviously. Another demonstrates how it prefers to nap on warm reed mats, not cold clay. The auntie gives you an accusingly gentle look. If you were a rattle, where would you hide? I confess that as a novice rattle, I would go exactly where hands are busy and conversation is best. Markets, doorways, and the shadowy corner where baskets lean together to exchange secrets. "Ah," she says, as if that narrows it to half the city. The Heron Down River performs a yawns so wide you can feel it in your own soft jaw. Wind slides across the mound with the careful hands of someone retightening a frame. The plaza watches without hurrying you. The ring of timbers beyond keeps a sideways eye in case time tries any tricks. You tuck roasted kernels deeper into your pouch, a bribe for later steps, and pat the tassel, which behaves itself. The dancer nearest to you tips her head toward the stair. We follow where clues enjoy being. Also, the stew fire is friendlier with emergencies than the sun is. You glance around this terrace one last time. Drum asking for ember, dancers holding pattern with humor, shells whispering encouragement, the city arranged like a song that knows how to welcome mistakes into harmony. Nothing is broken. Everything is merely being asked to stretch. You breathe once, then again, the way you were taught. Temples, throat, heart. And the world agrees to feel simple. Then you and your gently conspiratorial companions turn toward the descent, ready to look for a small missing sound and a small needed ember, as if both were cousins who wandered only far enough to make returning interesting. You step down from the courtyard with the detective squad you didn't know you'd joined. Your guide with shell whisper ankles, the auntie whose confidence includes every possible location, the stair supervising girl, and the drummer's apprentice carrying a clay cup like a captured sunrise for that spoon of ember. The slope tastes of dew again, a friendly reminder to keep your feet considerate. Granary ladder first, the auntie declares, because clues prefer high places to feel important. You nod like a seasoned sleuth who has never once lost an object while holding it. The granary stands on stilts, a tidy heron of a building. The boy with the reed broom from your climb pauses mid-swoosh and salutes, conspirator turned official witness. He gestures to the ladder where a single corn silk thread clings to a rung, pale gold, whispering coincidence. He was flirting with the wind, he reports, perfectly composed. Your guide pinches the thread into your palm like a warrant. You tuck it beside your tassel bookmark and roasted kernels, the pocket now a museum of polite mysteries. The ladder's top holds rice sack quiet. No rattle under the eaves, none beside the baskets of seed corn labeled in the local handwriting of knots and memory. You duck your head into the cool granary shade, where the smell is a blend of promise and dust. A mouse, dignified and scandal-free, considers you, then decides you are not a rumor worth chasing. Your wrist drifts a figure 8, a reflex now, and the movement tells you what sound is missing by the space it leaves. "Stew next," the auntie says, pointing with her chin toward the cook fire whose smoke draws a line you'd follow anywhere. The drummer's apprentice leans into the flame with a twig, coaxes a coal the color of very patient cherries into the clay cup, then cushions it with cedar shavings. He breathes once, careful and devout, and the ember answers with a faint cat purr. "For waking drums," he says. You cradle the cup for a moment, and the warmth climbs your wrists like encouragement. At the stew hearth, a pot hums the kind of song that settles everyone's calendar. A cook lifts the lid, lets the steam introduce itself. Corn, squash, a luxury of herbs, and laughs when the auntie inquires about missing gourds as if asking about nieces. This morning, a small rattle escorted a ladle like a bodyguard, then decided the role was beneath her. A second thread of corn silk lies on the mat, caught in the weave. You lift it with 2 fingers. The cook nods as though you've rescued an old friend from a puddle. She dots your thumb with a taste of broth, permission and snack, both, then offers a sliver of flatbread with a sugar of honey across its back. "Alignment celebrated," she winks. You inhale it, humble and grateful, while the ember in the cup makes a steady case for its usefulness. "Stone disc," the stair-girl reminds everyone, and leads you along the lane smoothed by many careful feet. Children are already added, rolling the stone planet toward a chosen stick horizon, counting glide in heartbeats. "We paused for clues," a boy explains without stopping the game. Such is the discipline of sport and investigation. Near the measuring stick, husk crumbs wink like pale fish scales. Your guide kneels, touches the ground, and listens with her fingers. "She danced through here, bossy as ever," she smiles. A child presses an imaginary badge to your chest. "You're official now," she declares. "Finder's division." The lane leans toward the river, and so do you. Fog still sits in the low places like milk learning to be a cloud. Boatmen coil ropes into bowls on the shore, their hands remembering currents even when the water pretends to sleep. The heron, good auditor of mornings, stands on the sandbar, conducting drift with one slow wing. You pause to greet the boatmen with palms open, and they answer with a nod that says permission to search among their neat, river-salted order. The first boat yields only the pleasant clack of shells tied to a thwart to soothe fidgety journeys. The second holds reed mats rolled like scrolls. You unroll one halfway and shake it, polite, in case a rattle naps there. Seeds? No. A ghost sigh of light grit? Yes. The apprentice crouches to shelter the ember from a prodding breeze. The ember deepens to a thoughtful orange. "She's ready for the drum," she murmurs. And you feel how readiness can sit in your palms and not rush you. On the bank, a woman plaits reed grass into a long cord for tying baskets in boats. She watches you not find the rattle with the patient amusement of someone who knows lost things choose their own timing. "Listen for rain in a dry gourd," she advises, and returns to her braid, thoughts slow as tide. You do listen, ears tuning past wave hush and rope whisper and the far coin clink of copper, to a faint, uncertain skitter, almost a rattle, almost. Everyone freezes. Even the heron pretends it just didn't notice. The sound vanishes. Coy. Your guide tips her head. "Clues like games," she says. If you chase, they hide. If you stroll, they stroll with you. You adjust your pace to a loiter that has purpose only to those who already understand it. The skidder returns, small as a beetle's opinion, from the shadow under a low landing plank. Your stair-girl drops to a knee and peers into the gloom, as if negotiating with darkness. Friendly, patient, Union rules. I see a husk ribbon, she breathes, triumphant but whispering so the triumph doesn't run away. You lie on your side, cheek to cool earth, and let the river's hush fill one ear while your other ear attends the world directly. There it is again. A few shy seed taps, a quiet complaint that sounds exactly like a rattle that regrets picking adventure over rehearsal but refuses to admit it in public. You grin, careful not to spook sound with teeth. The boatman above you slides the plank just a hand's width, and light paints the shadow like melted pearl. "Hello, wanderer," the auntie coos, because of course she does. The rattle is there, belly dusted, corn silk tassel catching the light like a guilty crown. It is lodged against a coil of rope as if choosing an aristocratic sofa. Your guide looks at you, mischief tucked behind composure. "Shall we lure, not grab?" she suggests. The apprentice holds the ember cup a little closer. Warmth and scent and everything drums think is persuasive, while you take out the roasted kernels the child gave you earlier. "For later, when your feet ask for a story," she had said. Later has arrived with a tiny riddle. You tap one kernel against the plank. Tick, tick, soft rain pretending to be seeds in a gourd. The rattle answers with its own polite weather, barely, like a shy relative from out of town. You roll a second kernel under the plank. It bumps the rattle with gentle manners. The seed necklace on the stair-girl clicks 3 times, her way of counting hopes. The boatman laughs in his throat, a river sound. "She's listening," he says. Fog thins into torn silk. Sun paints a delicate coin on the water. The heron approves by doing nothing at all. You stay exactly as you are, cheek to earth, wrist remembering figure 8 even in stillness, breath set to the slowest metronome you own, so the moment can choose you. The rattle gives another skitter of consideration, pride and curiosity negotiating terms. The ember waits, a ready heartbeat in a clay cup. When the missing sound is willing to return, you will bring her back to the drum that wants pebbles again. For now, you and your new department of finders hold the soft perimeter of a game that teaches patience how to be joyful. You keep your cheek to the cool earth and ask the morning to be patient. The roasted kernel in your fingers becomes a small ambassador. You tap it again, tick, tick, like a polite rain rehearsal. Beneath the plank, the rattle considers dignity, the way someone important might pretend not to recognize a friend until the greeting is perfectly phrased. Your guide hums a single low note that doesn't try to persuade, just keeps the door open. The auntie adds a whisper. "We missed you, wanderer," turning absence into a compliment so graceful even objects would blush. The drummer's apprentice cups the ember closer. Warmth curls under the plank with cedar breath, a friendly hand extended into shade. You roll the second kernel gently until it kisses gourd. A soft reply, chick, like a seed clearing its throat. The stair-girl slides one bead on her necklace back the other way, uncounting the last worry. "She's thinking about coming home," she stage whispers, because hope likes a narrator. Light widens. The river sends up a tiny breeze that smells like tin bells and wet rope. The boatman shifts the plank a touch more, careful as a bedtime storyteller closing a page. Corn silk tassel shows first, a pale pennant of surrender, then the rounded belly, dust gilded, then the neck, stubborn, shy, until the whole rattle admits, with a dramatic sigh only you can hear, that adventure has grown less interesting than applause. You cradle her in 2 hands. "Thank you for the tour," your guide murmurs to the gourd, as if to a cousin returning with gossip. The auntie, who has been right about every location, declines to brag, which is her most impressive skill. You brush the rattle with your sleeve, then with a wisp of damp grass. The dust leaves like a story, choosing its last sentence. The stair girl offers a thread of husk to retie the tassel's loose end. There, she says, official again, ready to say first hello. You lift the rattle to your ear and give the gentlest figure 8. The seeds answer with rain that is learned whispering from leaves. The boatmen nod, the heron approves without moving, and the river uncurls a sound like someone forgiving you for being new. Home, the apprentice says, and you all mean the drum as much as the courtyard. He covers the ember with a pinch of cedar, coaxing it toward the agreeable glow that instruments respect. As you walk, the rattle rides your palm like a bird that has decided to trust your wrist. Your other hand remembers the dew ritual, temples, throat, heart, done now in absent touch, the way habits continue even when the bowl is far away. The market turns its head as you pass, copper hush, reed quiet, shell humor, all making space for your small procession that is not quite a parade. At the foot of the stair you pause because gratitude asks for knees sometimes. For ladders that hold and planks that listen, the auntie says. For boatmen letting us borrow river time, your guide adds. You look down at the rattle. For wanderers who return, you say, and the gourd, unbegrudging, gives a decorous little chime. The stair girl advances 2 beads, this time for celebration. You climb again, soft feet, steady heart, each step a word the mound already knows how to read. The courtyard receives you with that perfectly average miracle of familiarity. The drum waits, still drowsy, still honest. Dancers hover at rehearsal positions that look like patients stitched to humor. When they see the tassel, shoulders lower as if someone loosened a too earnest afternoon. You set the rattle gently in its basket, which is to say, you return a voice to its choir, and the basket seems to square its woven shoulders. The apprentice kneels beside the drum, tilts the clay cup so a thread of ember heat can breathe along the drumhead's underside. Not a scorch, not a chase, just a shared mourning between skin and fire. He strokes the lacing, checks the knotwork with a shell smoother, and hums the same note he used before sleep. Your guide stands behind him, palm hovering, reading the air for the moment when warmth becomes readiness. Dancers step place without stepping sound, ankle shells resting, gourd bells schooling their optimism. Tap. The stick's soft end lands at the drum's margin. The sound lifts a finger higher than before, a promising puddle becoming a small pond. The apprentice moves the ember a handspan like setting the sun by thumb. He tightens one lacing, loosens another. The head shivers in the key of cedar. Tap. Now the note has pebbles in it, little round truths that skip once, then twice, then rest. The plaza hears and tilts a degree towards celebration. One more sip of heat, one more attentive smoothing, and the drummer, called forward like a rainmaker being handed his favorite cloud, lays a palm flat in the center. Are you awake? He asks the drum with a smile you can hear. He lifts his hand. Tap. Pebble into lake. ripples through ankles and ribs and reed trays, through copper bells that refuse to ring because decorum, through your own sternum where hominy still remembers you kindly. The dancers look at one another the way bakers look at dough when it has finally sighed into itself. The rattle you rescued shakes once as if clearing a throat, and the opening figure begins very nearly of its own accord. Press, lift, press, breath braided to sound, sound braided to feet. Your whist draws the figure 8, and the gourd rains a line so fine you could stitch a sleeve with it. The tassel brushes your knuckles on the turn. The seeds inside approve your timing by not arguing. The drum speaks in pebble sentences now, each pulse landing where you'd expect a good friend at your door. The courtyard, pleased, offers the softest breeze, which is the mound's way of nodding. Between phrases, the auntie drifts close to the basket. "We apologize for our brief theatrics," she tells the rattle, formal as tea. "Please accept honey later." Someone laughs under breath. Honey becomes a rumor that turns into a plan. The dancers pass the apology around like a bowl of cool water. One bows slightly to the drum, another to the ground, another to the sky. Gratitude settles on shoulders exactly like pollen, weightless, visible only when the light leans at the perfect angle. You notice the keepers at the timber circle watching from below, arms folded in the content posture of calendars that have gone well. One of them raises the reed cord with its sensible knots, return, surprise, and you read the day's sentence in the way their chins tilt. Yes, yes, yes. Children at the lane clap the stone disc once, respectful punctuation. The heron blinks. Rehearsal flows through the figures without trying. The planting bow, the breath step, the 3-seed turn, the ladle dip with less swagger than the rattle's bodyguard phase, and the long exhale that names the river without needing syllables. Between phrases, a corner of rhythm hesitates. Someone hums the offbeat, and the moment tucks itself back where it belongs. The drum, warm and lucid, gives a final confirming pebble that rolls around the courtyard like a round coin deciding on the right pocket. Break. Not a stop. Just that shared smile that means we did it, and we can do it again. Fretbread arrives with its thin brush of honey. The offer we owed becomes the sweetness we share. You bite, and the city's math tastes exactly as it sounded. Aligned, lenient, awake. The stair girl taps her necklace beads in a tiny applause you feel in your own wrists. The drummer closes his hand around air and opens it again, a magician's trick, meaning nothing, and therefore meaning everything. Look empty, look full, see how rhythm does that. Your guide touches your shoulder, eyes bright in a way that does not hurry. She says, "When the light turns amber, we carry this down." She nods toward the plaza, where market paths have been quietly setting the stage without asking for credit. You look at the basket, the rattle in rightful place, other gourds content, and the drum now agreeing with footsteps. Gratitude keeps floating down, like invisible petals, settling into hair, against cheeks, into the hollow at your throat, where your pulse lives. The city breathes with you. Inhale soft shadows, exhale ready feet. Below, the plaza opens its hands. Above, the mound releases a little of its morning to make room for afternoon. The rattle in your hand gives a single, dignified yes. The drum rolls one pebble toward the edge of the lake,
and then waits, smiling. When the sun leans warmer, you will step off this terrace in a procession that remembers every ladder rung and every borrowed ember. For now, you stand inside found music.
Amber slides down the mound like warm honey, finding every groove, and the courtyard inhales. Your guide lifts the tassel rattle once, hello, and the drum answers with a pebble that skips twice before resting, a small stone agreeing with a bigger lake. Procession, she whispers, which is really an invitation for shadows to grow brave. Shells stir at ankles. Copper bells clear their throats with tiny bright yeses. Gourds wait like birds on a fence, each one already convinced the song knows their name. You take your place in the second line, behind the dancers with husk ribbons on their wrists, in front of the boy who measures glide with bare feet. The auntie floats near the basket like a benevolent moon, and the drummer sets his palm to the head, reading temperature and temper. The apprentice keeps the embers cup tucked to one side, insurance you will not need, but love having. You feel the figure 8 in your wrist like a key warming in a pocket. Tap, pebble, pebble, rest. The first step is barely a step. Feet brush earth the way hands brush sleep out of eyelashes. Press, lift, press. A breath sighs through the line, patient and synchronized, braided exactly the way your milkweed cord twisted palm to thigh in the market. The tassel rattle draws a line of whispering rain. Reed trays answer with soft knuckles. Shell ankles stitch rain's cousin under the gourd's melody. You descend together, no hurry, a river of people obeying gravity's most polite request. At the first turn, light spills across faces like stories catching their favorite listeners. Children line the stair edges, each with a designated "please don't fall" glance they aim at your feet. You honor it, placing each soul with the ceremony of a promise kept. The drummer stays just uphill, sending a steady pulse that slides under your ribs and arranges your breath, as if it invented you. Across the plaza, the ring of timbers wears its own amber, posts glowing, slit remembering morning, keepers watching with folded arms and hearts unfolded. A small snag arrives with good manners. One dancer's bell cord loosens, and 2 bright walnuts of sound begin auditioning for escape. Without pausing the step, she cups them. You drift closer on the next press lift and offer the milkweed cord you twisted earlier, the one that promised it would tattle if pulled too hard. She bites it once, yes, strong, and winds a quick knot that looks like a swallow turning in air. The bells return to their home and immediately forgive the afternoon. "Friend fix," she breathes, and your chest glows like a warmed stone. Down you go, and the plaza rises to meet you the way a friendly porch meets a returning traveler. Market circles open like flowers at the passage of a shadow cloud. The basket maker pauses mid-plate to tap his knee in rhythm. The coppersmith lets one tiny bell test the air with a proud drop of sound. The potter, hands dusted river color, lifts a jar as if to toast the hour. The salt trader pinches 3 moon shards into a little bowl by the edge of the lane. For thirst to remember, it is invited, not feared, and nods you past as if last summer and next winter are both pleased with your timing. Gourds, bells, breath, braid, braid, braid. You feel the tassel skim your knuckles on every second turn. You feel the drum's pebble grow rounder as it rolls through the courtyard and down the stair and into the plaza, gathering neighbors the way calm gathers chairs. The heron on the sandbar completes the choreography by doing nothing perfectly, head tucked like a thought that refuses to worry. Past a granary stilt legs, under their shade that smells like stored sunlight, by the stew hearth, where a ladle salutes you with a shimmer of steam and a promise of seconds. Along the stone disc lane, where the children tilt their game into rhythm and the rolling planet obliges. The stair girl, now a ground marshal with bead authority, paces you for 8 steps, satisfied that the procession understands its manners. She flicks one bead forward when a kid in the 3rd line corrects an enthusiastic hop with an elegant apology. The sound grows thicker without growing louder. Every ankle shell that hums picks up a neighbor. Every gourd that exhales rain finds a bell to escort it. Every breath kneels into the one after it. Your wrist's figure 8 is an old friend now, a friendly hinge between seed and air. The drummer lets the stick land near the rim, then nearer the center, painting circles of tone that gather like evening geese. You feel your shoulders drop that last notch where trouble can't perch. At the plaza's heart, a path waits, dust sifted fine and combed into gentle spirals by someone who believes first steps deserve pretty handwriting. You enter the coil, procession lengthening as it bends, and the market folds itself around the space, becoming walls of nods and smiles and silence that knows when to listen. An elder sets a shallow bowl of water at one curve of the spiral. The surface holds the sky like a secret it's tired of keeping. Children take turns smoothing it, and every smoothing looks like a prayer embarrassed to admit it's a prayer. A small gust tries to recruit your tassel. It flirts, you smile with your eyelashes, the tassel agrees to behave. The auntie catches the breeze with a reed tray and bends it into usefulness, sending it past the drum, which appreciates a little lift under its voice. A baby on a hip kicks in metrical confusion and then discovers the downbeat like a new toy. The crowd rewards the discovery by pretending it was inevitable. When the coil's center gathers, the first line and the last line almost touches it. The keepers raise the reed cord, not, space, not, and you read the sentence again, return and surprise. The drummer answers with a roll that sounds like a handful of pebbles poured into the lake at once, and the gourd choir smiles without moving. Your guide tilts her chin and the figure changes. Planting bow becomes breath step. The 3-seed turn becomes a long exhale that names the river with no syllables allowed. You match them, and the plaza kisses your soles with dust like warm flour. At the final phrase, there is no grand finish, only a shared decrescendo, a room full of lungs agreeing to lighten together. Shells hush. Bells hang their last silver droplets in the air. The rattle smooths its tassel against your fingers like a cat deciding you deserve a forehead. The drummer places a last round stone exactly where your heart can keep it without noticing. You stand, you breathe, and you feel the braid unplait into simple threads. Gourd, bell, breath. Now just friends again. Amber lifts toward gold and then fades toward the modest light that means evening will be kind. The plaza thanks you by returning to itself. Market drift resuming, stew negotiating bowls, the stone disc rolling toward another carefully measured horizon. Your guide turns, smile quiet as a pond. Bread, honey, and night stories, she promises, tipping her head toward the reed mats waiting along the edge where elders keep seats shaped like patience. You touch your pouch, tassel, kernels, cord, salt's memory, and realize your pockets have learned this city's math. Carry only what agrees to be light. The drummer lowers his stick. The apprentice blows a respectful goodbye to the ember before pinching it into ash.
The heron, because it understands ceremony, at last takes a single step. You exhale with the city, one breath, one braid loosened, and let your feet become the softest version of themselves. The procession dissolves, not broken, just poured back into living. Somewhere behind you, invisible petals keep landing on shoulders, and you do not brush them away.
Reed mats unroll along the plaza's cooler edge, a soft sea waiting for ankles that have earned their rest. Smoke thins to transparent threads, and someone fans a low fire until it decides to purr rather than brag. Flatbreads arrive wrapped in warm leaves, stacked like moons that remembered to be generous. A comb of honey rides in on a carved board, amber cells holding sunlight with excellent manners. The auntie produces a slender reed knife and taps the board once. Permission requested, permission granted, and the first cut opens a chamber where sweetness has been rehearsing all day. You sit beside your guide, and the city sits beside the two of you. The drum has nothing to prove for a while. It leans against a post like a storyteller resting its voice. A child guards the honey with both seriousness and sticky fingers. An elder, eyes like river stones that have told many boats where to turn, smiles at the child and at the rest of you, palms up, empty and therefore trustworthy. Bread first, he says, so the honey doesn't forget who carries who. The flat bread has a char-kissing rim and a soft middle that folds without complaint. You tear a piece and it sighs a polite crumb. The elder lays the reed knife across the comb and presses. Honeybees swell and stroll outward, slow travelers learning plaza etiquette. A bee arrives to collect a light tax. The auntie thanks her for service and slides the comb so there's room for everyone's arrangements. The bee agrees to keep secrets, leaving with feet dusted in pollen like golden sandals. Voices settle into the half volume that stories prefer. The elder begins, without declaring he has begun, the way rivers begin before anyone notices. Once, he says, the river braided 3 ways because she wanted to test our patience. You taste warm bread. Honey lands on your tongue like a second dawn, and the drum inside your chest chooses the slowest tempo available. Around you, ankles still hum their invisible shells. Your wrist, independent creature, draws a tiny figure 8 just to feel at home. He tells of summers when water ran so high the canoes kissed roof lines, and the mounds behaved like a row of kindly grandmothers lifting skirts out of mischief. We stayed dry by listening to the posts, he adds, chin tipping toward the timber circle. Return and surprise. The keepers, loaf in hand, nod with the satisfied look of calendars that have accurate gossip. We set new marks in wet clay and called it humility, the elder says, smiling at the memory as if it were a relative who now writes better letters. Another elder leans forward, hair braided with a few stubborn silver threads that have refused all negotiations. And once, she says, a young corn dancer lost her rattle the morning of the great honey share. Laughter tickles the mats. You press your lips together, accomplice to the day's déjà vu. She lifts a brow at you, delighted to discover that today has performed the callback for her. We lured it out with roasted kernels, she continues, and promised it first hello. Objects respect order when you invite them kindly. The rattle in your basket, sated by service, gives one tiny agreeable tick, which the plaza politely pretends not to hear. Flatbread moves from lap to lap like a slow planet. Honey shines on every fingertip like blessings that forgot to be intangible. Someone passes around a jar of berries smashed with a harmless amount of mischief, tart and purple, insistently cheerful. The salt trader offers a pinch into each palm, and the sweetness deepens the way shadows deepen when lanterns are lit. Richer, gentler, more itself. A boy leans against your shoulder and falls asleep standing for 3 breaths, then wakes, embarrassed, and solves embarrassment by eating 2 pieces of bread. The elder thanks him for demonstrating a known cure. The stories meander and plait, river roads trading their passengers. "Here," says a boatman, pointing to a patch of darker sky that evening is opening. "That is the path of the turtle's back, the stars you follow when fog pretends to be smarter than you." He draws the pattern on the reed mat with one finger, a long, careful arc, then a small hook where you promise to turn. Another voice tells where sandbars whisper themselves into being and how you test them with the tip of your paddle, the way bakers test if bread has remembered its spring. Your guide folds a leaf into a cup and pours a sip of something that tastes like peppery mint and patient roots. "For throat and story," she says. Your dew ritual returns in ghost shape: temples, throat, heart, and the sip seems to visit each place you remember touching with morning cool. You feel the day's braid hold together, posts and plaza math, stairs and the wind's hand at your back. Ember in a cup, rattle coaxed from under a plank, drum waking into pebbles, procession poured into spiral. Return in surprise, again and again, like breath disguised as choreography. A small interruption. A honeybee considers your knee and begins a campaign of escape. You intercept it with bread, and the auntie applauds with 2 finger taps, the approved volume for heroics this late in the day. "You'll be insufferable after this, saving honey and all," she teases. You promise modesty and take another tiny piece just to be safe. The bee returns to verify fairness and leaves a diplomatic bow in the air. The elder's voice lowers. "Night stories ride easier when feet have done their listening," he says. He points toward the river where twilight stretches like a cat. Moon will lift soon. Fireflies will test their lanterns where sand keeps its secrets. He tells a tale of a canoe whose owner forgot his own shadow and then found it again in a pool polished by stars. "He dipped his paddle and scooped the moon," he says, and even the practical market aunties let that sentence pass without a single revision. Children arrange themselves into the geometry of leaning on someone else's shoulder. The drummer turns the stick in his fingers the way someone turns a good idea, then sits it down, decision made to let the night do the talking. Copper bells perform their quietest experiment, 2 notes barely waking, and then staying in bed. Your guide brushes a stray tassel thread behind your wrist bone with the care reserved for instruments and trusted guests. Before the canoes, a bread truth. She lifts her piece as if toasting the mounds. "We eat together so our stories walk at the same pace." You look around and see the rule already obeyed. Cheeks shiny, eyelids heavier, shoulders unargued. The plaza seems to widen while you sit, as if space enjoys being near this much agreement. Another thin wedge of comb travels your way, and you decline with the noble restraint of a creature who has counted to 2. The auntie accepts on your behalf and promises to guard it for the version of you that exists after the canoe ride. She tucks it into a leaf like a moon wrapped for later. The keepers finish their bread and draw 3 short lines in dust with their toes, an abbreviated blessing meaning yes, go, gentle. When the stories fold themselves like blankets, the honeyboard shows its amber losses as maps, small lakes where mouths have been. The reed mats feel like low tide. Fireflies practice commas above the sand, and the heron becomes an ink drawing, 1 stroke, sure and spare, against the river's soft glow. Your guide stands, palms down to smooth the air. "Moon paths," she says quietly, and the boatmen answer with rope coils and even quieter smiles. You lick the last gold from your thumb and stand too, the sweetness stored somewhere behind your ribs where a drum once placed a round stone and asked it to stay.
Morning's second glow finds the plaza rinsed and new, as if the night had folded everything carefully and put it back where gentleness belongs. Reed mats hold the shape of last evening's listening. Ash draws faint constellations under the hearth. Someone's laughter, sleep-thick, not sorry, arrives from a doorway like a spoon clinking a memory. You rub the last moon sugar of honey from your thumb and feel the drum's round stone still in your chest, ordinary and essential, the way bread is. Your guide greets you with sweetgrass smoke braided into air. She fans it once, over your hair, over your hands, over the pocket where tassel and kernels and the milkweed cord live together like good neighbors. So your steps keep the scent of our doorways, she says. The smoke threads your breath, and you file its memory the way you filed cedar, dew, and river light. The auntie follows with a grin that belongs to sunrise. I withheld a miracle, she announces, and produces the little leaf-wrapped wedge she promised to guard for the later version of you. You accept it with ceremony. For the walk, she adds, but not for the stairs unless you plan to negotiate with gravity using sugar. Children gather with the solemnity of court officials and the chaos of sparrows. The stair girl carries a loop of corn silk braided into a ring, pale gold, soft as careful speech. For your wrist, she says, and ties it above your pulse with 2 clever turns, so your figure 8 remembers who taught it. The thread settles on skin like a second, friendlier heartbeat. Another child arrives with a small pellet of river clay, cool and willing. The keeper from the timber circle kneels, dips a fingertip in the dew bowl. Yes, the dew ritual persisted through the night, and presses clay just below the corn silk ring. Mark of crossings, water and earth on the road together. He smooths it with a shell, and the shell leaves a tiny crescent, a moon adopted by your wrist. You return what you can. The milkweed cord you twisted in the market, offered back with both hands. It tattles when pulled too hard, you confess. The dancer whose bells needed mending laughs. Then it will keep me honest, she says, winding it into her anklet. The coppersmith taps his smallest bell once. Permission, and the note blesses the trade. The auntie adds a second blessing by pretending not to cry. Breakfast repeats itself on purpose. Hominy steam, cedar sigh, the one glossy kernel offered to the hearth for those who coached water to sweeten corn. You take your bowl, and the ring of braided husk appears underneath, a throne for fingers still wearing river clay. The first spoonful tastes like patience. The second tastes like goodbye refusing to be dramatic. Someone pinches sumac, someone else sprinkles 3 crystal moons of salt, as if calling tiny tides to help swallow. You chew at the plaza's pace, which is to say, correctly. The drummer arrives holding his stick like a well-behaved idea. He taps once, small as a pebble dropped into a cup, and the note says, yes, the drum woke and intends to be kind all morning. The rattle you rescued leans in its basket, tassel neat, seeds pleased, a model citizen after one glamorous misdemeanor. Your guide gives it a stroke with 2 fingers, and it whispers a thank you wouldn't hear if you hadn't earned it. People bring the light news of early hours. A turtle wrote its slow autograph across the mud near the ponds. A roof beam dried into the truest line anyone ever saw. The heron accepted a promotion to director of continuity and immediately took a break. The boy from the stone disc lane demonstrates a new glide with the seriousness of a monk translating wind. He offers you the measuring stick, and you draw it along the dust to mark exactly this much of morning left, which earns you a nod from the keepers for understanding that units can be made of anything if everyone agrees. Someone fetches a small bundle wrapped in bark, presses it to your palm. Inside, 3 roasted kernels, for later when your feet ask a story. A flake of salt, to invite thirst's good manners. A frog-bright berry, to remind your mouth about mischief. And a thread of sweetgrass, for doors. Traveler's pocket, the elder says. We send people with tiny tools, not heavy proofs. You tuck the bundle beside the tassel ring's tail, and the pouch hums with polite treasures. Farewells do not happen all at once here. They arrive in a slow braid you step through. The basket maker touches your knuckles to pass you his palm's memory of roundness. The potter, hands river-dusted, draws a fingertip circle on your wrist beside the moon crescent shell left, a second planet for your private sky. The salt trader lifts 2 fingers in a gesture that looks suspiciously like a tiny wave rolling in. The boatmen untie a rope, retie it purely for joy, and point with their chins to the seam where night learned how to become morning. You walk past the stew hearth, the ladle salutes. Past the granary stilts, the broom whispers. Past the lane, the stone disc hums a promise to keep gliding whether you watch or not. At the timber circle, the keepers hold up the reed cord. Not, space, not. Return, surprise, return. One makes a little mark in dust. Today's shadow's mouth drank the line here, and then erases it with the sole of his foot. We remember. We also make room. You feel the sentence seat itself somewhere between the sweetgrass and the salt. Your guide touches her temples, throat, heart. Do without the bowl now, because the gesture has made itself at home, and you follow. When you smell sweetgrass, that will be the city waving, she says. The auntie adds, when your steps make a sound like pebbles in a lake, know we are laughing somewhere close. The drummer contributes, if a gourd argues with you, feed it honey. Everyone approves this policy. Children line the first stair and deploy their patented please don't fall glances. You bow to their authority. The stair girl presses your palm to the stone she calls the stair's favorite and counts 9 heartbeats with you, beads clicking under her breath. For luck with unhurried departures, she declares, and slides 1 bead backward so that luck doesn't feel crowded. At the base of the mound, the plaza pauses, as if tying your sandals with invisible fingers. Your pouch rides light. Your wrists carry corn silk and river moon, and your tongue remembers salt and honey with embarrassing clarity. The heron, ever professional in its leisure, angles one eye at you and pretends this is part of a standardized farewell checklist. The wind finds cedar somewhere and brings you a last ribbon of its voice. Up with us, your guide says, shells ready to whisper the password again. We'll see how the city wakes when you look back. You set your soft feet to the first stair. The second glow holds steady. The plaza lets you go, as politely as it held you. Behind, the market squares adjust their breath. Ahead, the terrace waits with that blanket-smooth earth where a drum once tried puddle and then learned lake. You carry the gifts that weigh nothing and touch everything, and the sweetgrass in your pocket begins its law. Doors will know you. Smoke will teach you which way is home.
Morning's second glow finds the plaza rinsed and new, as if the night had folded everything carefully and put it back where gentleness belongs. Reed mats hold the shape of last evening's listening. Ash draws faint constellations under the hearth. Someone's laughter,
sleep thick, not sorry, arrives from a doorway like a spoon clinking a memory. You rub the last moon sugar of honey from your thumb and feel the drum's round stone still in your chest, ordinary and essential, the way bread is. Your guide greets you with sweetgrass smoke braided into air. She fans it once, over your hair, over your hands, over the pocket where tassel and kernels and the milkweed cord live together like good neighbors. So your steps keep the scent of our doorways, she says. The smoke threads your breath, and you file its memory the way you filed cedar, dew, and river light. The auntie follows with a grin that belongs to sunrise. I withheld a miracle, she announces, and produces the little leaf-wrapped wedge she promised to guard for the later version of you. You accept it with ceremony. For the walk, she adds, but not for the stairs unless you plan to negotiate with gravity using sugar. Children gather with the solemnity of court officials and the chaos of sparrows. The stair girl carries a loop of corn silk braided into a ring, pale gold, soft as careful speech. For your wrist, she says, and ties it above your pulse with 2 clever turns, so your figure 8 remembers who taught it. The thread settles on skin like a second, friendlier heartbeat. Another child arrives with a small pellet of river clay, cool and willing. The keeper from the timber circle kneels, dips a fingertip in the dew bowl. Yes, the dew ritual persisted through the night, and presses clay just below the corn silk ring. Mark of crossings, water and earth on the road together. He smooths it with a shell, and the shell leaves a tiny crescent, a moon adopted by your wrist. You return what you can. The milkweed cord you twisted in the market, offered back with both hands. It tattles when pulled too hard, you confess. The dancer whose bells needed mending laughs. Then it will keep me honest, she says, winding it into her anklet. The coppersmith taps his smallest bell once. Permission. And the note blesses the trade. The auntie adds a second blessing by pretending not to cry. Breakfast repeats itself on purpose. Hominy steam, cedar sigh, the one glossy kernel offered to the hearth for those who coached water to sweeten corn. You take your bowl and the ring of braided husk appears underneath, a throne for fingers still wearing river clay. The first spoonful tastes like patience. The second tastes like goodbye refusing to be dramatic. Someone pinches sumac, someone else sprinkles 3 crystal moons of salt, as if calling tiny tides to help swallow. You chew at the plaza's pace, which is to say, correctly. The drummer arrives holding his stick like a well-behaved idea. He taps once, small as a pebble dropped into a cup, and the note says, yes, the drum woke and intends to be kind all morning. The rattle you rescued leans in its basket, tassel neat, seeds pleased, a model citizen after one glamorous misdemeanor. Your guide gives it a stroke with 2 fingers, and it whispers a thank you wouldn't hear if you hadn't earned it. People bring the light news of early hours. A turtle wrote its slow autograph across the mud near the ponds. A roof beam dried into the truest line anyone ever saw. The heron accepted a promotion to director of continuity and immediately took a break. The boy from the stone disc lane demonstrates a new glide with the seriousness of a monk translating wind. He offers you the measuring stick, and you draw it along the dust to mark exactly this much of morning left, which earns you a nod from the keepers for understanding that units can be made of anything if everyone agrees. Someone fetches a small bundle wrapped in bark, presses it to your palm. Inside, 3 roasted kernels, for later, when your feet ask a story. A flake of salt, to invite thirst's good manners. A frog-bright berry, to remind your mouth about mischief. And a thread of sweetgrass, for doors. Traveler's pocket, the elder says. We send people with tiny tools, not heavy proofs. You tuck the bundle beside the tassel ring's tail, and the pouch hums with polite treasures. Farewells do not happen all at once here. They arrive in a slow braid you step through. The basket maker touches your knuckles to pass you his palm's memory of roundness. The potter, hands river-dusted, draws a fingertip circle on your wrist beside the moon crescent shell left, a second planet for your private sky. The salt trader lifts 2 fingers in a gesture that looks suspiciously like a tiny wave rolling in. The boatmen untie a rope, retie it purely for joy, and point with their chins to the seam where night learned how to become morning. You walk past the stew hearth, the ladle salutes. Past the granary stilts, the broom whispers. Past the lane, the stone disc hums a promise to keep gliding whether you watch or not. At the timber circle, the keepers hold up the reed cord. Not, space, not. Return, surprise, return. One makes a little mark in dust. Today's shadow's mouth drank the line here, and then erases it with the sole of his foot. We remember. We also make room. You feel the sentence seat itself somewhere between the sweetgrass and the salt. Your guide touches her temples, throat, heart. Do without the bowl now, because the gesture has made itself at home, and you follow. When you smell sweetgrass, that will be the city waving, she says. The auntie adds, when your steps make a sound like pebbles in a lake, know we are laughing somewhere close. The drummer contributes, if a gourd argues with you, feed it honey. Everyone approves this policy. Children line the first stair and deploy their patented please don't fall glances. You bow to their authority. The stair-girl presses your palm to the stone she calls the stair's favorite and counts 9 heartbeats with you, beads clicking under her breath. For luck with unhurried departures, she declares, and slides 1 bead backward so that luck doesn't feel crowded. At the base of the mound, the plaza pauses, as if tying your sandals with invisible fingers. Your pouch rides light. Your wrists carry corn silk and river moon, and your tongue remembers salt and honey with embarrassing clarity. The heron, ever professional in its leisure, angles one eye at you and pretends this is part of a standardized farewell checklist. The wind finds cedar somewhere and brings you a last ribbon of its voice. Up with us, your guide says, shells ready to whisper the password again. We'll see how the city wakes when you look back. You set your soft feet to the first stair. The second glow holds steady. The plaza lets you go, as politely as it held you. Behind, the market squares adjust their breath. Ahead, the terrace waits with that blanket-smooth earth where a drum once tried puddle and then learned lake. You carry the gifts that weigh nothing and touch everything, and the sweet grass in your pocket begins its law. Doors will know you. Smoke will teach you which way is home.
You reach the top again with the same quiet courtesy you used coming down. Soft feet and a steady heart. The terrace is a held breath, cool as the inside of a gourd. The swept earth remembers last night's pebbles in this morning's patience. Below, the plaza wakes the way bread wakes under a cloth, rising in small, pleased waves. Smoke writes a thin ribbon. The market rustles its reed skirts. The ring of timbers stands like elders who have already said good morning and do not need to repeat it. Your wrist, circled with corn silk and the cool crescent of river clay, answers with a small, calm beat that matches the drum you still carry inside your chest. The corn dancers line the terrace's far edge, husk ribbons moving like grasses in a shallow wind. They do not call, they never have to. Their nod reaches you, a gentle tilt that contains arrival and departure in the same gesture, as if the day itself were bowing through them. Near the drum, the rattle you rescued rests in its basket, tassel neat, seeds content. The drum leans in shade, loyal and lucid, a round stone of sound that will keep speaking after you go. The air smells faintly of cedar and mint, of last night's honey and this morning's dew, and your breath falls into a long, even shape that promises to be generous on the road. Your guide comes to stand beside you without urgency. She looks across roofs and gardens and the silver thread of river, then looks at nothing at all, the way of seeing called keeping. The mounds teach us how to stand for others, she says, touching your shoulder with a hand that smells like cedar smoke and sweet bread. The auntie arrives, disguised as a breeze, and slips one tiny knot into the corn silk at your wrist. For pleasant surprises, she whispers. Credentials in kindness fully intact. Down by the timber circle, the keepers lift the reed cord with its sensible grammar, knot, space, knot, and let it hang like a blessing in the air. You read the city the way a scribe reads a page just finished, not to edit, only to learn its handwriting. The granary on stilts keeps its dignified heron pose. The stone disc lane glows with 2 new measured glides. The stew hearth winks beneath its lid. The market lays out morning as if it had never tried anything else. A potter carries a jar with both hands, and the air around her steps becomes more careful in sympathy. On the far bank, a boatman tests depth with the tip of his paddle and listens to sand the way you were taught to listen to a drum, expecting honesty, forgiving mood. In your pouch ride small reliables, roasted kernels for later when your feet ask a story, a flake of salt to keep thirst friendly, a thread of sweetgrass so doors will know you, the tassel tale that bookmarks this chapter whether or not you reread it. Inside your chest, the drum's round stone sits where it was placed, ordinary and essential. You draw a small figure 8 in the air, farewell stitched to gratitude, and the gesture warms your wrist as if the rattle were still there, smiling with seeds. The dancers lift their chins in the softest yes. One brings her palms together in the planting bough, and the terrace breathes along with her. You will hear our steps in other dust, your guide says, not as an instruction, but as weather. She points with her chin. There, to a far tree line where prairies open. There, to a bend in the river where moonlight will rehearse. There, to the middle distance where memory sets a low table and invites you to sit. The auntie, satisfied that all sugars have been fairly distributed, pretends to scold your restraint and tucks an invisible sweetness into your sleeve anyway. The keepers press toes into dust and score 3 short lines that mean yes, go, gentle. Children appear as punctuation. One bead slides forward to bless departures that take an extra breath. The heron, director of continuity by unanimous laughter, lifts its head, considers management, and elects stillness as policy. Your guide tilts her head toward the stair, and you understand. The last look includes turning away while you can still see. You offer the terrace a long, uncomplicated nod. No speeches, no bargains, just the respectful yes of someone who has been fed and taught and is now being let go without being untied. You step back from the edge. The city dims, not because it grows dim, but because you cup the memory like a lantern with your hand around it, shading flame so it will travel well. Cedar rides the breeze and braids with sweetgrass in your pocket. The cord's knots and spaces reliably divide hope from impatience. You descend one step, and the plaza draws a little closer. You descend another, and the market agrees to be sound instead of picture. On the landing, you look once more, not to capture, only to release, so the scene will keep breathing where it belongs. At the first stair's foot, a small bell tests the air with one precise drop of silver. It is enough. The dancers lower their hands, the drum relaxes, the plaza opens its day, and lets you pass without subtracting you. Your guide breathes cedar into your hair as a last kindness. When you move, take our quiet with you. When you stop, let it pool. The auntie presses both your palms between hers until you feel the patience of dough and the conviction of salt. Eat well. Sleep well when sleep is ready. You turn toward the path that leads through low grass and humming gardens. Behind your left shoulder, the ring of timbers stands like polite advice stitched into a coat. Ahead, the river holds its silver seam and promises to behave, unless surprise is part of return today, which would be appropriate. The corn silk at your wrist shifts. The clay crescent answers, cool and steady. The city, cupped in your hand, glows the way a lantern glows when a palm shields it from wind. You carry it into the morning without hurry, the figure eight of your wrist practicing a small, steady yes, and somewhere behind you, ankle shells whisper that same yes back, until both sounds become one quiet road.
Let your shoulders settle like reeds after a soft breeze, down and down until they find the angle the morning prefers. The mounds are behind your eyelids now, green shoulders resting, the plaza a wide, patient page that does not ask you to write a single word. The drum becomes a round stone again, placed in your chest, neither heavy nor light, just true. Feel it there, steady as the hush between two small waves. Breathe, long in, longer out, and let cedar and sweetgrass drift through, an invisible ribbon that remembers doorways and welcomes. You are still on the path, and also in a quiet room. You are still hearing shells whisper, and also the soft fan you turned on earlier. Both can be true, and both are gentle. The river has learned your pace. It walks beside you without asking questions, a silver seam you can follow with your eyes closed. When your thoughts try to step ahead, offer them a roasted kernel and a seat on a reed mat. When they yawn, let them nap where they are. Each exhale loosens a knot. First the small knot at your temples, then the one in your throat, then the easy one at your heart. The city knows you are leaving and does not mind. It prefers living guests to perfect statues. So, you do not hold hard.
You cupped lightly, the way you cupped that lantern of memory, the way the boatman cupped in ember, warm enough to guide, never hot enough to hurry. Now the last images dim like lamps at dawn. A heron becomes a line of ink. The keeper's 3 short marks for yes, go, gentle, fade into smooth earth. Your wrist grows quiet, the corn silk cool against skin. The drum's stone rests, and so do you. End of story. Sweet dreams.